Welcome back into another episode of the Believe in Georgia Tech podcast. I'm your co-host Jackson Caudell, coming to you on Thursday, February 26th, right around noon. Going to be a solo pod today, so you're going to be hearing a whole lot of my voice. No RJ today, but wanted to come with you with our show this week. Going to talk a little bit of everything. We've got some baseball results to talk to. They had a weekend sweep last week against Stony Brook, had an unfortunate loss to Georgia State on Tuesday. Not panicking about that, but do want to talk about it. Basketball gets back on track against Florida State Saturday, I believe, at noon at home. Last two home games. There's 3 games left this season. 2 of them are at home, Florida State and Cal, and then they finish up on the road at Clemson. And then going to talk a little football today. Combine, NFL Combine's going on this weekend. Georgia Tech has 4 guys participating in it. And then we're going to talk some spring football stuff, just underrated players at each position. I wrote about this earlier this week over on SI. Got a lot of questions about it, so I wanted to talk about it and kind of talk about some guys I'm watching at each position that I don't think are being talked about enough right now. But appreciate everybody tuning in. Love it if you would subscribe to the channel if you hadn't already. If you're watching this, like the video, follow us wherever you get your podcast, leave us a review there. Like we always say it, but we always want to reiterate it. Like, we love getting feedback from you guys. We love hearing from you. It makes us better as hosts, and it makes the podcast a whole lot better. It's geared towards Georgia Tech fans. We want to know what Georgia Tech fans think about the show and what we can do better, and things y'all want to talk about. Like, we always want to listen and read you guys' reactions. So appreciate anybody that does that. It means a lot to us. But I guess let's dive into it. And so when we last talked about baseball last week, they were coming off the monster win against Georgia Southern. Wasn't close. Go into the weekend set against Stony Brook, had a 4-gamer, did a doubleheader Friday, excuse me. Had a game on Saturday, had a game Sunday. It was fairly breezy, though they did trail for the first time all season in a couple of those games, most notably Saturday. A thing we're watching early on, at least I am, is Mason Patel. He hasn't pitched super well in his first 2 starts. The game against Bowling Green, he was a little off. They dominated that series, so it really didn't matter. But he really struggled against Stony Brook last Saturday. Dylan Loy came in and just pitched a scoreless game the rest of the time he's in there. The bullpen, they had a couple more guys come in because that was the game that went to extra innings. But Dylan Loy, who has been freaking awesome this year for Georgia Tech, did a really good job. You had Von Lackey coming up with a big hit, walk-off hit down the third baseline, hit third base and bounced up, and it was kind of, I won't say lucky, but it was fortunate. Like, it was a pretty cool ending. Sunday was just a complete wipeout. I mean, they scored 7 runs in the first inning and dominated from there. Ended up putting 21 on the board, I believe. But Tuesday was a little bit of a different story. And look, I want to tip my cap to Georgia State. Like, they deserve all the credit here. Like, they played their tails off and really won. Like, that's a pretty good team this year. At least they've had a really good start so far. Like, I don't have enough in-depth knowledge to know if maybe they're an NCAA tournament team and make it to a regional. But based off this win right here, like, this was really good. And there's a little bit of blame, I think, to go around everywhere. Like, sometimes when you lose a game and you score double digits, it's easy to point at the pitching. I think you can point to the bullpen here, and I think you can look, Georgia Tech, I still believe, has, like, one game doesn't change my opinion on Georgia Tech's offense, of course, and it'd be foolish, I think, to say otherwise. But also, like, when you are touted as the best offense in the country, like, you have to put together more than 4 runs on 5 hits. Like, I mean, everybody was just kind of off. Like, Alex Hernandez was 0 for 4, didn't get a hit. Von Lackey was 0 for 3. You had Caleb Daniels 0 for 4. And they had chances late. I mean, like, the bases were loaded in the ninth, and, like, they had a chance to do it. And they just couldn't come up with hits and with runners in scoring position. Advincula hit that home run early in the game. It was 2-0. I thought we were in for another just big day for the offense once he hit it, in the first inning, and they got out to a 2-0 lead pretty quickly. But then it was just all Georgia State from there. And again, like, I give them a lot of credit. Like, their pitching staff was really good for them. like I said, Georgia Tech ended up with 5 hits in 31 at bats. That's just not good enough against anybody. Like, especially, when you get into ACC competition. Um, Jackson Blakely got the start, went 4 innings, had 9 strikeouts in 4 innings. Like, he faced 19 batters and struck out 9 of them. I thought he was really good. Gave up 3 hits, walked 2, hit one batter as well. And then the struggles kind of started. Like, it was pretty rough for Caden Campbell. And like, I'm not picking on any of these kids, but like, it was just bad game. Um, didn't even finish the inning, gave up 2 hits, 3 runs, 3 earned runs, no strikeouts. He only got to face 3 batters. Like, it was tough. Caden Spivey struggled a little bit. Jamie struggled a little bit when he came in. Like, it was the bullpen overall just had a really tough day. Like, they kind of got it together in the last couple innings, but like, they just have to be better going forward. And all this is like, I don't think it's everybody should be disappointed in a loss, especially like it. I know I wouldn't call Georgia Tech and Georgia State rivals, but because you are in the same city, because you're both in the same state, because you do like you play in baseball annually, you might not play in all sports annually, but you play in baseball annually, and like it can sting, like, no pun intended, to lose that game. Like, but they're going to rematch next Tuesday. But first, Georgia Tech's going to face Northwestern this weekend. Little curious to see how that goes. Like, I want to see how they bounce back. Like, this is the first time they've really faced adversity all year. Like, obviously, it's their first loss. They're still 8-1. Northwestern's going to come into the game 5-2. They're on a 5-game winning streak. Actually, they took a couple of bad losses early in the year, but they beat Cornell 3 times. They beat Boston College twice already, and now I think anybody that follows college baseball knows that Boston College is going to be one of the ACC's worst teams this year, but it's still notable that they won those games. So we'll see. We don't have an official starting rotation for the weekend, although I seriously doubt it's going to be much different from what it has been. Tate McKee should go Friday. I assume Mason Patel is going to continue to go Saturday. Should mention Cooper Underwood. He was really good in his last start Sunday. Didn't have a hit, struck out. I don't have the number in front of me, but he was really good. And his first 2 starts have gone really well. Like, he's been a highly touted freshman that just has a lot of good stuff, and his first 2 starts have been really strong. Yes, it's against Bowling Green and Stony Brook. I know that. But I do think that he's going to have a chance to continue to get better as he gets more game experience, because that's what it's all about. You have ACC play coming up next weekend, because you have this weekend series against Northwestern. You face Georgia State Tuesday, and then your ACC opening series is here, and it'll be at home against Virginia Tech, who's off to a pretty solid start. Like, they did get their doors blown off, I know, in one game against Rutgers. They came back and won that series, actually, and they've played quite a few close games. But Virginia Tech's off to a solid start. But overall, you see what's happening in college baseball this week. Like, UCLA took a loss. Oklahoma lost by double digits to Arizona State earlier this week. There's been several teams that have, Tennessee lost a weekend series to Kent State last weekend. Troy just beat Georgia. So everybody can be upset about a loss. Like, I never want to tell like fans how they should feel about a win or a loss. I would just say, like, there's no reason to panic yet. It was a bad game. I highly, highly doubt that this offense is going to have many days like this. But they can happen. Like, these kind of things can happen in baseball. Sometimes your bullpen's not going to have it, like Georgia Tech did on Tuesday, or didn't have on Tuesday. And then sometimes your offense is just not going to have it either. And then when you combine those two, you get a loss to almost every team you play. Like, that's just the reality of it. But excited to see how they bounce back this weekend against Northwestern. I expect them to win the series, possibly sweep the series as well. But I'm also just interested to learn more about Northwestern. Like, I know the Big Ten is not it's not the best baseball conference. Like, UCLA is obviously highly touted, and they have a lot of good players. But I know, like, top to bottom, it's not like the strongest league. So I'm anxious to kind of see Northwestern in person and do all that stuff. But enough baseball talk. Just kind of some basketball stuff. Since we last talked to you, nothing has, exactly gone super well. That you had the blowout loss to Virginia last week. They hung around a little with Louisville on Saturday, and I use that term lightly, to be honest. They got down. I think they were down as much as 25. they at the end of the first half and then like halfway through the second half, they did have some moments where they did keep fighting, and it was notable. Like they did cut the lead, I think down to around 11 or 10 with like 6 or 7 minutes to go. It's still they ended up losing by 17 or 18, I believe, and they're not going to make the ACC tournament at this rate. It's look, I promise we're going to do a lot more basketball stuff when a decision's been made one way or another. But they play Florida State this Saturday. Up till their loss this week against Miami, Florida State, like they had a tough start at the beginning of the year, but they have actually been playing like one of the ACC's better teams as of late. Like they're not a tournament team because how bad they were early in the year, but like they found some stuff that works here lately. I mean, they were very close to beating Virginia. They blew out Virginia Tech. I, I don't think Georgia Tech's going to win Saturday. Hashtag breaking news. Captain Obvious here, but yeah, we'll see what happens again. They close with Florida State this weekend. They have Cal. That's the last home game of the year next weekend. Then they finish up at Clemson, who has actually lost 4 in a row. Like they lost to Wake Forest, who lost to Boston College last night. So we'll see what this team finishes with. It's not been pretty at all this year. We'll see what changes are made, if any, and just go from there. So the main things I want to talk about today, like the combine, it starts today. Like players were kind of filtering in this week, but I know defensive linemen, kickers, and linebackers go today. Now, obviously, no, the 4 Georgia Tech players that are in the combine, I guess I should have started with that: Haynes King, Eric Rivers, Keelan Rutledge, Amari Harvey. All of these guys have played in various all-star games leading up to the combine. When you have like Keelan Rutledge played in the Senior Bowl, Haynes King and Eric Rivers played in a bowl, and Amari Harvey, I think, were all in the same bowl game. So I'm excited to see what these guys do this weekend. I think if you can kind of read the tea leaves and read what various draft analysts are talking about, like when they talk about these guys, everything I read is saying how big of a week this is for Keelan Rutledge. He was awesome at the Senior Bowl. Like everything I read and heard on like podcasts or whatever, was that he had a very good week. He was playing all different positions along the interior. Obviously, he played right guard at Georgia Tech. The versatility is super important. And that was something that both Brent Key and Jeep Wade talked about several times, through spring, is like, we want to train these guys on all positions. And the more you're able to do that, the more versatility and flexibility you have at those kind of positions along the offensive line, or, whether you can play on the edge or on the interior, on the defensive line, in the secondary, whether you can be inside at nickel, whether you can be on an outside corner, and just do all this different stuff. It just makes you more valuable. And I know that that's nothing groundbreaking that everybody listening to this podcast doesn't know, but I think that his ability to play either guard spot or center, I think, is going to be really key to his NFL future and how long he's able to stick around. I think if he has a good week this week, I'm not a draft expert. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be. Maybe he sneaks into the late second, early third round. I know a lot of the stuff I've seen has him as a late third, early fourth, but if he has a really good week, I know this. I believe it's touted as a pretty strong offensive line class. I'll need to kind of fact check myself on that one, but I think Keelan Rutledge is going to be a good NFL player. I think he's made of the right stuff. I think that's cliche to say, but like just when I talk to him after practices or after games, like I think he has the right mindset to have a decade-long NFL career along the interior of the offensive line. Haynes King is somebody I'm very excited to see. Like I think just him doing drills, and I think him being invited to the combine is very important. I think he's going to dominate interviews. Like I think, you get him in a room and you talk to him, and just his love for football, his football knowledge, I think is just going to be awesome for NFL teams to see in person. I know a lot of the stuff that goes on there. It's just, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of, people questioning like, okay, how much do you love football? How much can you show me? And I think again, I don't pretend to be a draft analyst, anything like that. I think I'm anxious to see what the NFL thinks about him, and I want to hear different draft analysts talk about him, because most of what you hear is great athlete, great guy, probably not an NFL quarterback. I want to see him get a shot. Like I think he absolutely deserves a shot, and I have seen far worse quarterbacks. Pardon my poor English there, but I have seen some questionable decisions made by NFL teams on which quarterbacks that get drafted in that fifth, sixth, seventh round kind of range. I think if you get, I do think Haynes King is going to be drafted. That I might be proven wrong on that, but I do think he's going to end up being drafted. I just think he's going to ace any interviews. I think he has a chance to run a really good 40. And we'll see how he does in the throwing drills. Like, I know he's not perfect. I'm not sitting here saying he's perfect or he should be a first round pick or anything, but I do think he has a lot to prove at the combine. I think he can do it. Eric Rivers, excited to see what his 40 time is. I think he has a chance to be a vertical threat in the NFL, much like he was here at Georgia Tech. I know he did some other stuff as well. But I do think he has a chance to have a big week. And we've always been a big Amari Harvey fans here. Again, I think his makeup, I think he's made of the right stuff. And I think he plays with the right mentality. And I think he was very underrated for all the issues that Georgia Tech had on defense, especially with some of their pass defense. Like, everybody remembers how much Amari Harvey was missed in certain games and in certain spots last year. And even going back a couple years ago, like the strides he's made from the time he got to Georgia Tech after transferring in and how he's leaving and how he's a combine invite and everything now, I think it's just awesome. Like, I think he's continuing to get better. I don't think any of these guys are quote unquote finished products yet. Like, I think they can all be useful to NFL teams. And look, call me a homer or anything you want to. I think all four of these guys are going to get drafted. Like, I think Georgia Tech's going to have four guys get drafted. Now, their first round pick streak is going to continue. Unfortunately, I think this year, like, they haven't had a first round pick since 2010 when both Demarius Thomas and Derek Morgan were first round picks. I thought the streak might have been broken a couple years ago with Keon White. He ended up going in the mid-second round, I believe, when he was drafted by the Patriots. He plays for the 49ers, obviously. Now he was traded this past season, but excited to see all these guys compete. None of that's going to happen today. Amari goes tomorrow. I believe all the defensive backs go tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow is tight ends and defensive backs. Excuse me. Saturday is going to be QB, receiver, running back. Sunday is going to be offensive line, so that'll be when Keelan goes. Now, we should have had somebody there today. We've talked about Jordan Vandenberg. Absolutely should have been a combine invite. I thought it was terrible that he didn't get invited. I also think Jamal Haynes should have been invited as well. I think those guys are really going to do well in workouts on pro day. But yeah, so that's kind of just a little mini NFL combine preview. I believe all that stuff's on NFL Network. Now that I cover all college sports and I also cover the NBA now, it's tough for me to watch the combine like I did when I was in like high school and college. Like, it was always like a must-have event. I actually did get to go 6 years ago when I was working in college football and in a personnel department. So, and it's an awesome event to be at. Like, it was on my bucket list, and I was always super thankful that I was able to go. But that's how you, like, tune into it, see these guys perform, and I think all of them are going to do well. Like, I won't say they have a lot at stake, but I do think you can improve your draft position. Absolutely. And I think all these guys have the ability to do that. So let's kind of transition more. We're gearing up for spring football. Like, that's kind of what we're, kind of mainly talking about right now, to be perfectly honest. And this was something I wanted to write this week, and I did earlier in the week, and just kind of talk about some underrated guys at each position. Like, I feel like we spend, and I'm included in this, I feel like everybody can kind of hone in on certain guys. Like, we want to talk about Alberto Mendoza a lot, and for good reason. We want to talk about Justice Haynes a lot for perfectly good reasons. Jalen Mbakwe, Noah Carter, like those guys. And this is not just transfers included. Like, I kind of want to just open the board and talk about all the different positions and some underrated guys. And I think the best place to start is quarterback. Look, everybody, this is going to be the main storyline in Georgia Tech. It's not going to be just us. Any Georgia Tech centric publication or podcast or whatever, like, the quarterback competition is going to be the biggest topic. It always is. It's the most important position on the field. It's the one everybody likes to talk about. And Alberto Mendoza and Graham Knowles are kind of the guys being mentioned. But I do know that Grady Adamson is kind of gaining a little bit more steam, and I think he is the most underrated guy here. I'm not going to predict anything, but I do think he has a much better chance at winning the starting position than people think. I loved him coming out of high school. I think he has very underrated athleticism, a very live arm, and Georgia Tech was on him very early. And look, nobody's track record is perfect, but like, when Georgia Tech has been early on some kids and gotten them and gotten commitments. Like, I mean, I think he was the first commitment in the 2025 class. Like, if I'm wrong, somebody please correct me, but I think he was at least one of the first ones. Again, underrated athleticism, very good arm. Some schools really made a run at him towards the end there. You know, he's from Oklahoma. I'm not predicting him to win the starting job, but and he's not Haynes King athletic. There are very few quarterbacks that just have that speed and that like change of direction and the different things that Haynes did do. I think Grady can give you a little bit. I think that's the one area where like I don't know that Graham Knowles can. And I think Mendoza had that long touchdown run. Like he was a pretty solid runner in some spots, but I don't know that they used him a lot as a designated runner, and I don't know that you're going to get as much QB run game as you got over the past 3 years with Buster Faulkner and Haynes King. But I do think Adamson is very much in the mix to be the starter this year. Like I think he has a chance, and I think he's a guy that a lot of people are going to keep an eye on this spring, and I think everybody should. So running back, I picked Malachi Hosley, and like I know that sounds super strange because like Malachi Hosley was the second leading rusher for Georgia Tech last year. He was the top running back for Georgia Tech last year in terms of yards, and he didn't even have 100 carries. I mean, he had 98 carries last season, 697 yards, 7.1 yards per carry. Like him and Justice Haynes both averaged 7 yards per carry. I know that's like the stat everybody kind of probably has in their heads at this point. Like 7 touchdowns as well, long of 55. I think just with so much focus on Justice Haynes, and again, there should be. Like I've talked about him a lot, I've written about him a lot. Like I think people should be talking about Justice Haynes and what he could do in this offense. But I don't think Malachi Hosley should be forgotten either. I mean, for somebody that put up the numbers that he did, look, I don't think he's gonna outrush Justice Haynes this year. Like I would not bet on that. I don't think he's gonna get as many carries, but he was very steady last year and did well when called upon. Also had 14 catches for 119 yards. Like, I don't think he's going to be like your number one receiving threat, but who knows? With some of the questions at the receiver position, the running backs could be a lot more involved this year. I think Malachi Hosley is someone that I think people should just keep in mind in terms of I think he's underrated as like he could be an all ACC back too. I think most people just view him as the number 2 guy that's just a good compliment. Like he's very talented, and I think he has NFL traits and NFL potential as well as Haynes. I don't think he's a first round pick per se, but like I think he is going to help form like the top running back duo in the ACC. I think I would be shocked if either Georgia Tech or Miami doesn't have the top running back duo in the ACC. I know Miami's bringing all their guys back, but like I don't know if when healthy, like I think it's very close with Miami's top 2 guys and Georgia Tech's top 2 guys, and like that may be a hot take to some, but I do think if Justice Haynes had finished the year healthy last year, like he would have surpassed the 1,000-yard mark, and Malachi Hosley wasn't too far from it, and he did it on. I mean, he had more carries than he had more yards than Jamal Haynes on 26 fewer carries. So just I think Malachi Hosley is in for a really solid season. As the I'm gonna call him the 1A or the 1B. Excuse me, I meant the 1B as a 2-headed monster, and just I think the running game is going to be awesome this year. Just remember Malachi Hosley. I think he's getting to a spot where he's underrated, just given all the talk about Justice Haynes. For receiver, I think this is interesting because, again, we've discussed it numerous times that the only wide receiver that's returning that had any yards last year was Jordan Allen. He was really solid as a true freshman last season. And look, I mean, he was the 4th leading receiver overall. I mean, he had 22 catches, 304 yards, 13.8 average yards per catch. Didn't catch any touchdowns last season. He did have a rushing touchdown. He carried the ball 6 times for 85 yards, 14.2 average, had a 54-yard run. I believe that was in the Boston College game, if I'm not mistaken. He's not my pick. I think DeBron Gatling would probably be my pick. As I remember, he stood out to me last spring. Like he was a bigger guy than I thought. And he had more presence. I mean, he's only listed as 5'11", 200 pounds, but like he really stood out to me last spring. And I think he needs to stand out this upcoming spring and into the season, because when we talked about the transfers last week and mentioned Isaiah Furman is like, okay, if he's not an impact player, like one of Georgia Tech's highest impact players as a transfer, like what does that mean for the wide receiver room? Like, does it mean that a lot of guys stepped up and he's just another key cog in the machine in the wide receiver room, or does that mean Georgia Tech's wide receiver room is below average? I think both things could be possible. Both things could be true this year. But I think one guy that I don't think is getting talked about enough is Gatling. Look, I think Allen and Furman are pretty solid starters. I think it's just who else joins the rotation. Could you see freshmen like a Darnell Collins or a Kentrell Davis or a JJ Winston? It's tough for true freshmen to crack the starting lineup and be players consistently, but it has happened under Brent Key. Eric Singleton played from game one as not a highly touted freshman coming in. Like it wasn't like he was a 5-star recruit and like it was like, of course he's going to get playing time, but he really stood out in the summer and into the fall. And then he caught a touchdown in that game in Brent Key's first game as the full-time head coach in that game against Louisville on that Friday night. What feels like forever ago at this point, but guys can play early, and I it wouldn't shock me if any of them did. Look, Javen Plummer coming over from Cal, more of a special teams guy, but he does have size. I mean, he's 6'3", 215. Like, he could provide some things to this receiver room. But I would go with Gatling. Look, he was a local high school kid, went to South Carolina, transferred over to Georgia Tech really, really fast. I think he could really provide a vertical threat if given the opportunity. Didn't play much last year. Like I said, his main action really came in the spring game, and I know it can be tough to judge spring game performances, but I think he has a chance to really break out this season. Tight end was tough to pick an underrated player because we've covered all these guys extensively, especially the incoming guys from the transfer portal. Gavin Harris, Chris Corbo, Spencer Mermans. I think all three of those guys are going to play early and often. So it can be kind of challenging, but I do think Gavin Harris is getting slept on a little bit because he doesn't have the All-American tag to his name. Look, both Chris Corbo was an FCS All-American. Spencer Mermans was the highest graded run blocking tight end in all of college football, including the FBS level. Obviously, you have to prove that coming from playing in the Ivy League and at the FCS level and coming up. But I think those guys get talked about a little bit more because they have some of those things attached to their name, and rightfully so. Gavin Harris is a really strong receiving threat coming from New Mexico State. He's played at quite a few different places as well. 6'3", 250. I think tight ends are going to be very involved in this offense. They were already involved under Buster Faulkner, and I think Brent Key likes using multiple tight ends. I mean, there's a reason they brought 3 in, as well as you have some incoming freshmen and some guys coming back as well. But I also think it's the same is going to be true in George Godsey's offense. With his track record as a position, like he's coached the tight ends at the NFL level a lot, like with the Baltimore Ravens, with the Miami Dolphins. And I think tight ends are going to be a big part of this Georgia Tech offense. I know that's not really a thing now in college football. Like a lot of guys or a lot of teams don't really use tight ends. I mean, when you watch the Indiana-Miami national championship game, the tight ends were not the thing that stood out. They were probably the position that stood out the least of everything. And I think that's just true. You can watch any of the playoff games from this past season, and tight ends are just not used as much. But I don't think that that's going to be true necessarily for Georgia Tech. And I think some of it's going to be just, I think it's a part of the offense, and it could just also be if the receiver room doesn't, if guys don't step up, you could see a lot of these guys used. But I think Gavin Harris is the most underrated guy. Although, like I use that term loosely here. Like I think all these guys are going to play and play often, and I think all of them are getting talked about a decent amount. But like I said, I think Corbo and Mermans get a little bit more buzz because of some of the accolades they have that they've done at a lower level. Offensive line, I'm kind of doing this as a whole. So when we talked about offensive line in the transfers last week, I mentioned that you have Ethan McKinney back. You have Malachi Carney back. You bring in Joseph Ionata and Markel Samuel from the transfer portal. I think there's going to be some mixing and matching a little bit. Like I do think Ionata is definitely going to play center. And I feel pretty strongly that McKinney's going to play left tackle, but I know they like to cross-train these guys as well. And I think it's just about finding the right 5 and finding where they fit. I think the most underrated guy for me right now, I think, would be Jamison Riggs. And the reason I say that is because he was like in the thick of the right tackle competition heading into the spring last year. And I think he's going to compete for a spot somewhere. Like I just think he's going to compete to be on the field somewhere. Like it was go back to when Georgia Tech landed him over Clemson as a recruit. He's been in the program for 2 years. You can say he has a new offensive line coach, but he's familiar with Coach Mogridge already, when he was the assistant offensive line coach in 2024. So you already have a good relationship there. You're not going to be, I don't think, learning things a whole lot different. Like every coach does things a different way, but I think already being familiar with each other is really good. And I think he has a chance to play. Look, I think those 4 guys that I mentioned, I think are going to be starters somewhere along the line. And I think it's just about finding like who else is in there. Like you have a ton of candidates. We'll kind of do a positional deep dive as we get closer to spring. But I think Jamison Riggs is somebody to keep an eye on because he got a lot of run in the spring last time. He battled Carney for that right tackle position in the fall. Carney went out. I think experience had a lot to do with that. But Riggs has played. It's been up and down. Like you can look at the PFF numbers, and it's not great a lot of the time. But I do think he's going to continue to get better. He's stuck with it, and I think he's somebody to know. So defensive line, I grouped it together, but I may do a little separately here, like defensive end and defensive tackle. So I think underrated, I would say Amontre Bradford, and I would say that because he did flash last year. Like there were some games I know in PFF, like he had one of the higher grades in terms of pass rush, and he has all the physical tools. Like I've talked about this kid a lot since the fall. Like I think he's somebody that does have the physical ability to be an every down player in the ACC. And I know you want depth along the defensive line, but I think he's a guy that can really make an impact the more he plays and gets better. 6'5", 255. I think he's going to get a chance to play quite a bit for Georgia Tech this year. They did bring in guys on the edge. Look, you had Noah Carter, of course, is going to be. They're hoping he can be a high impact player. Jordan Walker from Rutgers, veteran presence, does a lot of things well. We talked about him on the show last week. Tajay McCoy from Oklahoma State, again, veteran presence, is going to be counted on for depth, leadership, is going to play as well. I think Georgia Tech really needs some young guys to step up at certain positions, and defensive end is one of them. I kind of battled between Amontre Bradford and Andre Fuller. Like Andre Fuller got a ton of run as a true freshman, and I liked a lot of what I saw. I've liked him ever since. He was an in-state kid. I think he was actually the first kid that was committed in the 2025 class, and I think Grady Adamson followed him. Again, if anybody wants to fact check me on that, please do. Like I could be wrong on that, but Andre Fuller was a guy they liked for a long time, and I think he's going to be heavily in the mix. But yeah, I really like Bradford. I'm gonna go down with that ship. And I keep believing in him. Like I want to believe that he can really be. I don't know if he's like a first round pick or anything. Like I'm not sitting here saying he's going to be an All-American, but I really believe in his ability and what he can do. Linebacker is kind of tough because again, you're bringing back everybody but Tajay Butler, and that was I think he had probably the most upside in the room. But like I went with Cayman Spalding there, and I think I mainly did it because of how he played towards the end of the season, especially with how he blitzed. Like Georgia Tech blitzed quite a bit in the Pitt and Georgia games, and he was a big part of that. Like Georgia Tech is going to rotate their linebackers quite a bit. Obviously, you have Eford, you have Lightsey, you have Spalding. Melvin Jordan came back after entering the transfer portal, and they really needed Melvin Jordan back just for depth purposes. When you lose Butler, it's all mostly true freshmen behind him with guys like Braylon Outlaw, Kamani Morales, and those guys. I think if given the opportunity, with how much havoc Jason Seymour wants to cause as a defensive coordinator and everything and the turnovers they want to create, I think Spalding can be a very useful player. Again, I don't expect him to be an all-ACC player. I don't expect him to be an All-American, but I think he is a very useful player in spots, and Georgia Tech needs to improve in a lot of areas on defense. And I think getting after the quarterback, I think using him on blitzes and just using him in various packages, I think could prove fruitful. And in the secondary, again, I kind of combine those positions. I went with Phoenix Felton, and I did that. Like, look, I've talked about Tay Harris a lot. I think he's an absolute stud in for a big season. He's going to be one of the leaders in the back end. Felton got in, he did end up playing, I think, a little under 100 snaps, but he played a lot in the Georgia game and in the BYU game. Of course, there were some ups and downs, especially in the BYU game. Like, he was a true freshman. playing against two excellent teams. Like Georgia was obviously in the playoff. They were the number 3 seed, I think, in the playoff. BYU had an argument to be in the playoff. He got experience against two really, really good teams. And I think he's going to factor in heavily. And for all the attention that Harris does draw, and again, rightfully so, he's a very talented player, and I think he's going to be very good for Georgia Tech this year. Don't count out Phoenix Felton, man. Like I think Georgia Tech is. I have some concerns about the safety depth because there's not a lot of it. Like there's not a lot of experience back there now that you've lost Omar Daniels and Clayton Powell-Lee. But I do think I like what Phoenix Felton is made up of. I kind of use some of these cliche terms a lot, but I think there's some truth to it. Like, I think he's made up of everything right, and I think he does a really good job, especially in run support. Like he wasn't the main reason for it, but when Georgia Tech started playing the run a little better, again, I use term a little loosely there. When they started playing strong defense in the second half against Georgia, I think he did play a good role in that. And you can go watch that game and watch the tape, and I think it backs that up. Corner, I think is interesting, and I would say I think as far as underrated, I went with Dalen Pinson. Look, we talked about him a lot last offseason. He was a top 100 player. He got a lot of love. He's a tremendous athlete. Like, go see what this kid is doing for track and field right now at Georgia Tech. He is just doing some really good stuff. Just a tremendous athlete and has a lot of upside as a player. Look, Tech is we talked about Amari Harvey, Rodney Shelley is gone as well. Zach Toby is back. John Mitchell's back. Daquan White is back. You have two true freshmen in Jaden Terry and Trey Stevenson who are still there. But Dalen Pinson, I think this is the year I think he can get on the field. I think he's going to battle, and I think he's going to get on the field. And I think it would be very good for Georgia Tech secondary if he enters into that. Like he coming in as a sophomore, 5'11", 175. I think just his athleticism, I think he may have the second highest ceiling in the cornerback room after Jalen Mbakwe. Like I think Jalen Mbakwe has like legitimate first round talent at defensive back. We'll still have to see what Pinson can do, but I think he has the second highest ceiling in that entire cornerback room. I didn't do specialists because the specialists are set in stone. Like I don't think you're going to get I don't want to find out who Georgia Tech's underrated kicker is between London Schafer and Aiden Burr. Like Aiden Burr is one of the best kickers in the country. But yeah, like I don't want to find out the underrated players at that position. Like I want those guys to play all year from game 1 to game however many Georgia Tech ends up playing, whether it's 12, 13, 14, like whatever. But yeah, so those are kind of the guys that I'm keeping an eye on as like underrated guys that I don't think are getting talked about enough that I think have a chance to really play strong. And some of them, like, yeah, Hosley, I consider underrated for different reasons. And I may consider like Grady Adamson underrated. Like, I don't think Adamson gets enough love as a potential starter, while, Hosley, like everybody knows how good Malachi Hosley is, but I do think he maybe is a little underappreciated after the addition of Justice Haynes. But everybody, let me know what you guys think about those picks. Tell me how wrong you think I am or how stupid you think I am for picking some of these guys. I always love it when I hear if it's a good pick like that. That's definitely welcomed as well. But if you guys agree with any of this, definitely make sure to let me know below. Let me know you guys picks as well. Like this is, spring football is fastly approaching. I want to hear what you guys think about some of these players and who you're looking out for. Definitely get that discussion going as we get closer and closer to the white and gold game here in a couple months. Have practices going. We haven't heard from Brent Key, at least in terms of like a traditional media sense. Like I know he's been on the radio and some other stuff, but we haven't really heard much from him since the BYU loss, as far as just talking about the offseason additions. Like I know a lot of coaches do like a press conference or something. Like I know several of them like did a signing day press conference in February, which that's kind of like a thing of the past at this point. But we haven't got a chance to hear from him. Haven't got a chance to really talk to the new coordinators, Jason Seymour and George Godsey. Although, like I said, like Godsey and I think Seymour as well were both on the radio at 680 The Fan, so got to hear them a little bit. But it's an exciting time. Look, ready for football to be back in the sense of what spring football is, and appreciate everybody tuning into this. I know solo pods may not be everybody's favorite because you're hearing me and me only for nearly 40 minutes. And I know maybe that's a challenge, but appreciate anybody that tunes in. Appreciate all the support you guys show for the show. It means a ton to us. Like Georgia Tech fan base is second to none. And I know it's the only fan base like I I interact with on a daily basis, but like it's you guys are second to none, and it's awesome the feedback we get and the interactions I have with you guys on whether it's social media, in person. Like it's what makes this job awesome, and I appreciate everybody for tuning in and everything. But if you haven't subscribed to the channel, would love it if you would like the video, follow us wherever you get your podcast, and I will catch you guys next week. See ya.